What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Devin Durbin, and this is the Durbin Compound. Let's roll that intro. In today's video, we're going to go over lug nuts. We're going to go over how to torque a wheel on. This is going to be a very novice video for those of you that are just starting out. You have no idea what a lug nut is, or maybe you are just doing your very first tire rotate, or maybe you had to take the tire off. Proper instructions and techniques of how to put it back on. So first, I want to go over something very important, which is the type of lug nut or wheel fastener is the proper term. But the type of wheel fastener that you might run into. So based on where the vehicle is manufactured, whether it's a domestic vehicle here in the United States, a Ford, or a German car like a Mercedes or a Land Rover or a Volkswagen, there are going to be totally different wheel fasteners based on where in the world your vehicle comes from. So most of them are pretty standard. They have the same concept all around. They all fasten a wheel to the vehicle, but at the same time there are different types. The one on the Land Rover is this huge is basically like a nut, and it has a big shank on it, and it goes basically the wheel the hole in the wheel is huge, so it's unlike any other wheel fastener. The hole is huge, and that this basically just tightens down onto the hub, and this outer piece is what keeps the wheel tight, and then it has a washer on it. So I'll roll for each of these lug nuts, I'll roll in a close description of each one. You can see it on the table, just how different they are. So this is a 27 millimeter wheel fastener. So this is like, what I do is I anti-seize all of the parts that are touching the wheel. If you're just starting out, remember, you do not put anything whatsoever on the actual threads. Some people do anti-seize on the threads, and that's everybody's opinion. But when it comes down to it, if you put any type of lubricant that will help the threads thread easier, then that's considered a wet torque, and you will be over torquing your fastener going to the standard specs. So if your wheel fastener was supposed to be torqued to 103 foot-pounds, or maybe it's 90 newton meters, whatever you're torquing to, you're going to over torque it because that's considered a wet torque. That lubricant between it, anti-seize or whatever you're putting on it, that lubricant between it is helping it move down the threads, so you can very quickly over torque. So the next wheel fastener, this is off of Mercedes. This is an actual wheel stud. I call this a wheel stud. It's a bolt. It has a little shelf piece to go around to your rim, mates it to the rim, and then this goes into the threads obviously go into your hub. Now, depending on what type of rim you have, it's dependent on, if you want to put some anti-seize in between there. What happens with the steel fastener and an aluminum wheel is they will corrode, and you'll see corrosion and rust and stuff like that happen between two dissimilar metals. That's most of the reason why your battery terminals always corrode, is because they're dissimilar metals, and then you have electricity going through them, so it corrodes a lot faster. Same concept here, except for there's no electricity, and it just will corrode over time. So if you go a long distance without rotating your tires, you might have some corrosion. So I will anti-seize that little bevel where it would go up against the wheel. Just something to think about. Next fastener up is simply a nut. That nut is usually used on Ford trucks, 8-lug patterns. Some of your smaller vehicles, when you have hubcaps and stuff like that, you'll have a nut. So some of your Hondas, Toyotas, anything with a hubcap, we usually have a small nut. So these are anywhere from 7/8 to 13/16, and you really don't need to anti-seize these whatsoever. It's steel on steel. You really don't have to worry about it. These nuts are a dime a dozen, and they go on and off very easily. So next is a decorative lug nut or a wheel fastener. This decorative piece is found on Jeeps, on most of your Daimler Chrysler products. You're going to have a decorative lug nut like this on your rim. So you have a chrome rim, and then you have chrome lug nuts that look like this. Now, one example that I do not have is a wheel fastener that is longer. That's usually for your 8-lug guys, big truck guys that have nice aftermarket wheels. Then you have a nice big lug nut on there. This is another example, a roll-in, the clip, another example of a decorative wheel nut. And then you have stuff like your locks. So your locks are going to be a lot beefier. They're going to have a completely different pattern here in the face. They're going to actually have to have a key. So if you're looking at something that has a goofy key, it's because you have a locking wheel lock, basically. Sometimes people do it in just one on each wheel. Some people do 5 different ones on each wheel, just on how much they care about the rims. So lug nuts and wheel fasteners come in all shapes or sizes. That's purely an example of all shapes or sizes. And then you have different makeups of steel types, whether it's aluminum or you have a steel fastener, or some people like to do titanium on nicer wheels. Ferraris and Lamborghinis using titanium wheel fasteners. You can go mild to wild. So let's pop on over to the vehicle. I'm going to show you exactly how I do it. Now, this is my interpretation of it and my opinion. So if you guys want to argue, oh, you're doing it wrong, or this and that, you can leave your comments below. We'll have a conversation about it. But ultimately, I'm going to keep doing what I do because that's what works for me. So I've got the Land Rover wheel off right now. Let's pop over there. I'll show you what I do and how I properly torque my wheels. All right, not to insult your intelligence at all, but vehicle is on the ground. We're lefty-loosey, righty-tighty, obviously. So we're going to take off our lug nuts, and then I'll cut frame. We'll come back into me installing it. So I'm tire rotating right now. So I literally, usually I pull up because I'm not putting a lot of force on the lug nut, but you can usually push down if you have a 4-way tire iron. Let me go get a 4-way tire iron. I'll show you exactly what I mean. Okay, so the next step is obviously taking off your lug nuts. So this is a setup that I use. This setup is basically an extension with a roller bearing handle on it, so that basically the shaft can rotate through the handle in your hands, so that you can hold on to it and then rotate the ratchet with the other side or with the other hand. I will put a link to this piece in the description below. I highly recommend these things. These things are awesome to just be able to use with your ratchet. So let's go over a couple different options that people might run into, because you don't have to have crazy expensive stuff in order to do maintenance on your vehicles. I think a lot of people get wrapped around the axle about having nice tools. Yes, I own a lot of Snap-on tools. I've come to like them. I'm just a hobbyist. I'm not a professional mechanic. But everybody is going to have a different budget, so not everybody can afford some really, really nice ratchets or whatever. So let's go over a couple different options. This is a flex head. This is a flex head, 1/2 inch, basically like a 2.5 foot long breaker bar / ratchet from Snap-on. Very nice tool to have. Do you need that? No, you do not need that at all. Do you need a ratchet or a extension with a handle on it? No, you do not. So most common way is maybe you just have a 1/2 inch Craftsman ratchet and a socket. So if you have just something like this and you're trying to get your lug nuts off and you can't get them, you can do a number of things. You can put a pipe on this bad boy. From time to time I've taken the pipe off of my floor jack. So if you have a floor jack with a steel handle, the reason I say steel handle is an aluminum handle will probably bend if you're trying to put the pipe over this and use this. Another option for you is to take a wrench and put it on the ratchet like this. So you take the wrench like that, hold it, and you can loosen it just like that. And boom, done, and I'm ratcheting it off. So that's an option, real cheap option. You do not have to have any nice tools. You could just have an old pipe laying around and you use a 1/2" ratchet. It can work just like that. Another option that some people might have is the standard wheel tire iron from your spare tire kit in your vehicle. That can work too. You can put a pipe on this. You can step on it with your foot. If you're on the side of the road, you put this on straight to the side. For those of you who have never taken a tire off, you put it on the side, and you're simply going to step on the other end. So let me go over on the other side of the camera and I'll show you. So you have it on here like this. Put your foot up here, and you're slowly just going to put your weight on it, and it will let go just like that. So too easy. And then when you're putting it back on, if you're on the side of the road, this will suffice. Go over to the other side, put your foot on it, and tighten it down. Not a lot of weight, just half of your body weight. Just put your foot down on it a little bit, and that will torque the lug nut on enough that you can get home. So I've used this on the side of the road many times. So just another option for you. You can use these. Usually these are designed small so that you can spin them around and you don't have to worry about it. So when you're trying to take your lug nut off, you can spin it around with one finger, spin it back on. They're designed for ease of use while you're on the side of the road trying to make that tire change as quickly as possible. Alright, another option is a 4-way tire iron. This one is not going to fit my 27mm lug nuts, but this is another option for you. So if you had a bar like this, then you can basically take your arms and use the center as a fulcrum, and you're tightening or loosening it as much as you can. Sometimes you put this on here, do the same thing where you step on it and loosen it up, and you can do it that way as well. So just a couple options on what people might have or might not have. I just use this combination because I'm here in the garage. Obviously I'm not going to have this on the side of the road. If I need it, I have the tire iron. So let's go ahead and crank these lug nuts off, and then we're going to rotate the tires, and then I'll come back and we'll talk about tightening procedure. Alright, so I've got them basically loose to the point where I can now spin them out by hand or close to. Now we're going to jack the tire up, take them the rest of the way off, and then let's talk about that. Alright, next thing to talk about is when you're taking this wheel off. So a couple manufacturers out there, if you have really nice wheels, if you have aluminum alloy set like I have on my Mercedes, my AMG wheels, something that you might want to invest in is a tire removal pin. So that tire removal pin, in essence, what it does is it will go over the threads on your one lug nut, and what it'll allow you to do is you thread it onto the end of the lug nut or thread it into the hole in your hub, and it will allow you to pull the tire out onto that pin and drop it down. So what happens is you have your brake caliper in here and your brake disc, and there's also a dust shield behind it. So when this thing plops down off of the hub centerpiece, it can scrape up against your dust cover and basically mar up the barrel of your wheel. So if you have really nice wheels, it's worth investing in a little screw-in pin. I don't have an example here on the Land Rover, but invest in the little screw-in pin because it will help you when you pull your tire off, that it will come down on the pin instead of on a dust cover or on the caliper. So how I usually do this is I do not bring the tire very far off the ground, so that when I pull this off of here, it is not scraping on what I don't want it to. And then all I do is let it off. So that's one option for you. So I'm going to take this tire to the back. We're going to bring up the back tire here, and I will show you how to properly install the tire. Alright, so now that I've brought this rear tire up to the front tire, the reason why I keep it fairly low is because it's easier to move it into place to get it onto the hub. So I'm going to sit here for this part of the video. Hopefully I don't block a lot of this. So all I'm doing is lining up the tire or the wheel with my hub. So now I'm going to start these all by hand. which you should start every wheel fastener by hand, at least the first 4 or 5 threads, because it's easy to sometimes cross thread these. So never install with a impact gun. A lot of your dealerships, Firestone, Walmart especially, some of your inexperienced techs just zap your lug nuts on with a torque wrench, with a torque stick. That is not a very accurate way of doing it. And if you just zap it up here with the socket on a torque wrench or on a impact gun, you can quickly just cross thread the post or your lug nut, and then boom, you've screwed up the entire post because you decided to be lazy about it and put it on with an impact gun. You can take it off with an impact gun, but never put it on with an impact gun. So the general rule of thumb here is to tighten in a cross pattern. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 4, 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a star pattern. So anywhere, once you get the first 3, it doesn't matter where you go for the last 2, because you've already taken that wheel and tightened it against the hub. So when I tighten this, you'll see the wheel rock one way and then back the other. So do this by hand. You'll see it rock in, and then it's nice and snug, and then you'll want to cross the wheel and go in and tighten the other side. So sometimes if you tighten this in a different pattern, if you tighten it clockwise or counterclockwise, what this does is it will hang up sideways on the actual hub. So it will sit like this on the hub, and then when you go to tighten down the other ones, all it's doing is binding on a different lug nut on the other side. So it has the appearance of being tight, but it's binded in there sideways, and that's why sometimes you'll get into trouble with doing that. So tighten it in a cross pattern, and then you can torque in a cross pattern. You can torque counterclockwise or clockwise. Once you have them snug by hand, you've pretty much done what you need to do when it comes to a cross pattern. Of course, I'm sure there will be some controversy on that actual opinion of it, but you can, after you've tightened them up, then you can go through and tighten them counterclockwise just to make sure that they're still snug, and boom, you have it tight enough to put it back down on the ground to tighten the wheel. So let's go over and do that now. Okay, so now that my wheel is on the ground, I'm ready to torque. So I do not torque with an extension. In theory, and a lot of people have proved it, a extension this way does not matter. It will not increase or decrease your torque. Some people will argue that, but I've done it firsthand and I've tested it, and I might make a video in the future about what changes the torque. But when it comes to length of extension, it should not increase your torque whatsoever. Now, one thing that I do like to eliminate is that side play. So when you're talking about using something like this, when you get into torquing, you might have your wrench side to side or up and down, respectively, and this might just skew your torque a little bit. I'm using a Snap-on torque angle or a Tech Angle torque wrench. This one's a half-inch variety. If you're interested in seeing my review on this Snap-on torque wrench, fully electronic, you can click in the right-hand corner up here on this link, and it will take you over to the video on the Snap-on torque wrench and my review. Okay, so now I have set up my torque wrench. I just turned it on. I set it to 103 foot-pounds. So one thing that this torque wrench does, and it does awesome, is it counts how many times you've torqued to that specific torque. So the great thing about this is right now it's told me that I've only torqued 9 times. So I already did the other side of the vehicle, the driver's side of the vehicle, and I rotated those tires and I torqued those lug nuts. Well, I only torqued 9 of them. So now I have to go back and find that 10th lug nut that I didn't torque. So it's a real lifesaver sometimes for that. Now, is it going to matter that one lug nut is loose? No, but I might lose that lug nut from it rotating around and falling off. These lug nuts are $27 a piece the last time I checked, so they're not cheap. So let's go ahead and torque this. I am going to go ahead and torque it in a cross pattern. So this electronic torque wrench is awesome. It shows me a digital readout of exactly where I'm at on the torque. All right, 1. I will move down, cross the tire or cross the rim, and then let's torque our next one. Okay, and then we'll come back. Remember that star pattern. Back across. All right, and it now reads 14, so that means that I torqued all 5 of these and it has been counted. So, as always, I hope you got a little bit of information out of my video today. Hope I showed you a couple different options. We went over all of the wheel fasteners. We went over what they look like, rolled in some footage of what those look like. Then we went over uninstalling the rim and how you can keep from marring up your wheels, and the proper procedure on that. Then we went over putting on the lug nut, or putting on all the lug nuts, tightening in a star pattern, and then torquing in a star pattern. So this is obviously a high-end torque wrench. You do not have to have a nice one. You can use a click type torque wrench. They all work the same. I would highly recommend getting a torque wrench if you were doing lug nuts. Some people will go as far as doing the 2-finger pull as hard as they possibly can. So what I mean by that is they will put the socket on here, and then they will proceed to do a 2-finger pull on the ratchet as hard as they can, and that's a torque for them. So not very precise way of doing it. I do not recommend that whatsoever. Just my take on it. So I appreciate you watching my video. If you like my content, go ahead and hit subscribe. I'd love to take you on throughout the channel, and hopefully you follow me down the road. We'll see you guys next video.